Hello everybody, welcome to another episode of EBCW. Today we're on Velocity, and we are going to discuss something that has been making waves across the wrestling world for the last practically a month now. Before I do that, I do just want to say we have an epic tag team match between the War Raiders and Evolution, comprised of Batista and Randy Orton, as you see here. I'll try and do my best to commentate over the match as it progresses. However, I do have a lot to say about this particular topic. So, let's talk All Elite Wrestling, AEW. The newest promotion taking the wrestling world by storm, and wrestling just the entire IWC by storm. And they haven't even had their first event yet, if you don't count All In. Now, if you don't exactly know what I'm referring to, let me just quickly backtrack and explain that All Elite Wrestling is a promotion which was started or is being started by the Young Bucks, Matt and Nick Jackson, and Cody Rhodes, as well as some other members of the Elite, formerly of the Bullet Club, such as Hangman Page, possibly Kenny Omega. I don't really know that off the top of my head. There's nothing been released yet about that. We really won't know until the Royal Rumble whether or not he joins. But because if he joins in the Royal Rumble, that obviously Kenny's going to be part of WWE. But that's a completely different story. Now, basically, these several men have left the companies that they've called home for several years. Cody and the Bucks and Hangman leaving Ring of Honor and New Japan, while Kenny pretty much just leaving New Japan, although, like I said, he's still questionable to join the promotion. And basically, they've just been making waves, man. They left the company. They had the release of the company on New Year's, which was in the episode of Being the Elite, and it was actually a pretty cool way to debut the the logos and all that shit. And I have to say, the logo for AEW looks pretty cool. Now, as far as other stuff I know about the promotion, I know for a fact that I think the owner of the Jacksonville Jaguars, I think their name is Khan, I believe. They are also, I think they own the company, and I think they've made the Bucks and Cody executives of said company. So that's all I know in terms of like the ownership side, I guess you could say financial side. But obviously, if the owner of the Jacksonville Jaguars is backing you, that must mean you have a shit ton of money to spend. As far as I know, they have a show coming up in May called Double or Nothing. And they're also going to have some sort of charity show for gun violence coming up in the Florida area. I don't really know when that will be. But that's that. And then they've also had some pretty high-profile signings, both on the star end as well as the just the independent wrestling end. For instance, they've signed guys like, or they signed women, I should say, like Britt Baker, who, for those of you who don't know, was part of Ring of Honor for the closing end of 2018. She's also done. She was also part of All In with the 4-way women's match, and I believe she's also dating. Adam Cole, who was part of WWE. So yeah, and I've seen her wrestle. She's pretty good. I think that's a pretty good addition to start off with the women's division. They've also got, of course, Hangman Page. They've also gotten Pac, the bastard Pac, who, as we all know, is formerly known as Adrian Neville, or just Neville when he made the main roster. Of course, we all know this. If you guys live under a rock, you would know the story. You should know the story of how that went down with Neville and WWE and the Cruiserweights and all that stuff. That was a big story for several months, and now Neville is making waves once again on the independent scene, going under his old name, Pac. And for what I understand, the man is a bastard. Of course, that's a wrestling pun. And of course, probably one of the biggest names of them all is Chris Jericho. They've actually signed Chris Jericho. Don't know for how long exactly, but they've signed Chris Jericho for All Elite Wrestling. And I guess if you want to make major waves in the wrestling world, you have to sign one of the biggest names in the company, or in the wrestling world in general, being the fact that Chris Jericho for the last year or two has absolutely been probably one of the most enjoyable been one of the most enjoyable wrestlers to watch, no matter what promotion he's in, whether it's New Japan, whether it's WWE, or anything. Now, some other stuff about AEW that I've also read about is the fact that Ring of Honor and New Japan will not actually be working with the company, which is kind of strange considering I feel like it's a detriment on their part. And I'll tell you why. And because they have this massive Madison Square Garden show coming up around WrestleMania weekend, which is around April, I think. They have this massive Madison Square Garden show where Ring of Honor and New Japan will be, working together. Now, obviously, being that the Bucks and Cody and Kenny and a few other members are not a part of this company anymore, odds are that's going to kind of hurt the actual show, at least in my opinion, considering they're both major names. That's basically where I'm getting at with that. So because they're both major names, or not both, but of course all these names I mentioned are major, it's going to hurt probably attendance, at least I think. Correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not trying to sound like a smark, but I just think when they originally released that, Ring of Honor is going to be running a show and New Japan's going to be running a show with Ring of Honor in Madison Square Garden, you have to admit that the Bucks and Cody and any member of the Elite or Bullet Club would have a role in selling the tickets. Now that that's no longer a thing, we can only imagine how the attendance is going to be, impacted. So I think working with AEW with this show as well helps both companies. But we'll have to see, to be honest. And I will admit though, I don't want to say scummy, but it is a little bit shitty of the Bucks and Cody and all these guys to leave right almost a few months before this major show. I feel like Ring of Honor and New Japan, or they could have allowed their contracts to be extended at least till that point, and they could have called it quits then, because who doesn't want to wrestle in Madison Square Garden? Let's be honest. But that's that, to be honest. And that's pretty much all. That's pretty much all the news I've read. Impact apparently wants to work with all Elite Wrestling, which will only pretty much not only help AEW, but it will definitely help Impact. Impact's already been consistent and great with all stuff they've done, but who knows what will happen. If anything, it'll kind of rub off on AEW to get them a good start. So yeah, that's about that. So that's basically all we know so far about all Elite Wrestling. We also know that they're expected to have a very major television deal. We don't know what network yet, but there's been rumors of a couple of networks being mentioned and whatnot. I do want to say this though, and I don't want to sound preachy, but something that's really been bothering me about the wrestling internet, like the wrestling fans on Twitter and whatnot, is they are actually so hate-filled with some of these guys that they're actually hoping that the company goes under in less than a year, if even a year. And I kind of think that's shitty. I'm not going to lie. I kind of think that's extremely shitty on their part to even say that. Now, if you don't like the Young Bucks or whatever, that's okay, or Cody or whatever, that's fine or whatever. You have your right to opinion of who you want to cheer for or who you enjoy and whatnot. But the point I want to make is, if the fact that you want them to fail is that you not only want them to fail, you want everyone else who works with them to fail, whether it's the wrestlers that have been signed and whatnot. And we have to admit, nobody wants to be unemployed, right? The fact that these guys could do something pretty major in terms of, especially since they're saying that, women and men are going to be paid equally. Do you, in a world where, SJWs are practically running the world, would you really want a wrestling company that pays, women and male wrestlers equally? At least that's what's been said. Would you want them to fail? I don't know. I just think these hate boners, I'm gonna call them that. These hate boners that people have towards AEW right now is just completely ridiculous. I'm not gonna lie. I just think it's incredibly stupid of them to say, "Oh, I want it to fail." Because if you want just the Bucks and Cody to fail or whatever, that's fine. But if you want the whole company to go under, and you want all these guys to lose money or be out of jobs, you're just a piece of shit, man. That's just how I see it. And again, I don't want to sound preachy, but that's just the reality of what that's just my interpretation of what I've been reading across the internet wrestling world. Of course, these people probably don't have jobs themselves, and they probably don't understand what it's like to, be out of one if their company went under. So that's all I got to say about that. Anyway, I can only hope that AEW has success, because as far as I'm concerned, in wrestling, competition is key. Companies help build each other up when it comes to competition. Why do you think the Monday Night Wars were so huge? Because WCW and WWE were trying to raise each other up to see who can actually beat each other in the ratings and, put each other out of business. Of course, we know the result of that. But the point I'm trying to make is we need another company to make waves. What's Ring of Honor's doing decent. New Japan is still trying to work its way into the U.S. as best it possibly can. Excuse me. Impact's probably been one of the most consistent pieces of wrestling television in the U.S. for the last year. And I can only hope AEW helps raise the stakes of everyone involved. Anyway, guys, that's been this episode of EBCW. As you can see, the War Raiders are victorious. My name is Ed0626. Please let me know what you think about what I said down in the comments section below. And in the description, you'll find all my social media shit, as well as my radio show, which should start back up January 28th. I hope you guys enjoy. I'll catch you all in the next one.